It is getting dark, and you are a long way from home. You have been walking all day on a road you do not know, through country that belongs to somebody else. Nobody here has ever heard your name, and there is nowhere to sleep. Not because you cannot afford it, but because the thing does not exist. Nobody in this story ever pays for a bed. There is no inn anywhere in it, no room for the night, no such idea. Ahead of you, there's a house with a fire lit inside it. And in the world this poem comes from, here is what happens when you knock. A complete stranger comes out, takes you by the hand, brings you in and gives you a seat by the fire. Somebody washes you. You are handed the best food in the house and as much wine as you want. And nobody asks you who you are until you have finished eating. That is not kindness. That is not somebody being nice to you. It is a law. It has a name, Xenia, and it is one of the hardest rules in the ancient Greek world. Break it, and you are not being rude. You are the villain of the story. And once you can see that law running underneath the poem, the Odyssey stops being a run of monsters and islands. It turns into something much stranger. 24 books of the same rule, tested one situation at a time until it breaks. Here is what it looks like when you switch it on. Odysseus was never trapped in the Cyclops' cave. He walked into it. The door was standing open. The giant was out on the hills with his sheep. The place was stacked with cheeses and full of penned lambs, and his crew told him exactly what any sane person would tell him. Take what we can carry. Get back to the ship. And he said no. Homer tells you why in Odysseus' own voice, and then adds a handful of words that ought to stop you dead. He would not listen to them. It would have been far better, because he wanted to see the man himself and whether he would give him gifts of entertainment. 6 men are about to be eaten alive because Odysseus stood in a monster's kitchen waiting for a present. Not because he was greedy, because he was owed one. And in his world, being owed one mattered more than an open door. So why does a law like that have to exist at all? Because there is nothing else. No police force, no border, no embassy, nothing whatsoever standing between a man a long way from home and whatever the locals feel like doing to him. And a society that still needs people to move, for trade, for messages, for marriages, for alliances, has to invent something that makes a stranger safe. With no state to enforce it, the only things available are a god and a habit. That is Xenia. And here's the tell. Now, the Greek word for a stranger is xenos. The Greek word for a guest friend is also xenos. The language does not separate them. There is no third category and no neutral setting. A stranger is a guest, or the system has already broken. Now, the obvious way to read all this is that the Greeks were simply a polite people, and hospitality was good manners. It is not manners. It is a procedure. A scholar called Steve Reese took the hospitality scenes in Homer apart and found a type scene, a standard sequence with standard components, the way a wedding has standard components. He counts 35 typical elements across 18 scenes in the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Homeric hymns. No single scene uses all 35. They are all built out of the same kit. The stranger appears at the threshold. Somebody gets up. He is taken by the hand, led inside, given a seat. He is washed. He is fed. And only then is he asked who he is. That order is the whole thing. Feeding a man before you know his name means the meal cannot depend on the answer. You're not weighing up whether he deserves it. You have already committed, and then you find out what you have committed to. Every awkward hospitality moment in the poem comes from somebody getting that order wrong. And when he leaves, he does not leave empty-handed. He gets a Xenian, a guest gift, and an escort onward to wherever he is going next. The gift is not a tip. Watch what it actually does. There is a scene in the Iliad that shows the whole mechanism working in about 40 lines. 2 men square up to kill each other in the middle of a battlefield, on opposite sides. Diomedes for the Greeks, Glaucus for Troy. They trade the ritual insults, they get to names, and it emerges that Glaucus's grandfather was once a guest in the house of Diomedes' grandfather. On the way out, one of them handed over a belt, and the other handed over a golden cup. Neither of the men standing on that battlefield was born when it happened. Both of them stop. They agree to avoid each other for the rest of the war, in the middle of a war, and to seal it, they swap armor. And Homer, who cannot help himself, notes that Zeus must have taken away Glaucus's wits, because he traded gold for bronze, the worth of 100 oxen for the worth of 9. That is the joke. But look at what has to be true for the joke to work at all. A cup given away 2 generations earlier is still binding on the grandsons, in a war with people dying around them. So this is not hospitality in our sense. The historian Gabriel Herman argues that Xenia is closer to a kind of manufactured kinship, nearer to god-parenthood than to friendship. It makes 2 families relatives, permanently, and you inherit it whether or not anybody asks you. Which raises the obvious question, who enforces a contract with no court? Zeus does. He has a job title for it. Zeus Xenios, Zeus of strangers, and Odysseus, standing in that cave, actually tries to use it. He says it out loud. Zeus is the avenger of suppliants and strangers, and he attends upon strangers who are owed respect. He is citing the statute to the monster, and he gets the best answer in the poem. The Cyclops, Polyphemus tells him, care nothing for Zeus who bears the aegis, nor for any of the blessed gods, since we are much stronger than they are. That is the entire character in one line. He is not stupid, and he is not uninformed. He knows precisely what he is being asked, and he has done the arithmetic on it. And there is a second enforcement mechanism, much odder than the first. Late in the poem, a suitor throws a footstool at a beggar and hits him under the right shoulder, and another suitor turns on him. But the objection is not about kindness. It is, what if that was a god? The gods, he says, take all sorts of disguises and go about the cities in the shape of strangers from far away, watching how men behave. Any beggar at your door might be an inspection. Now read the journey with all that's switched on, because the journey changes shape. Almost every island is a hospitality scene that has failed in a different way, and they are laid out like a set of test cases. The Lotus Eaters are hospitality that dissolves you. They share their food freely, and the food eats your memory and your reason to go home. The Laestrygonians and the Cyclops are the same crime at two scales. The host eats the guest. Circe feeds the men a meal that turns them into pigs, which is the dinner doing the eating. Then Circe and Calypso both become the opposite failure, hospitality that will not stop. 7 years of it on Calypso's island. The escort onward is part of the deal, and she will not give it, so the guest is trapped inside the courtesy. Hylas is the cruelest one. He is a flawless host. A full month of entertainment, and then the single most useful guest gift anybody hands anybody in Greek literature. An ox-hide bag with the winds tied up inside it. And when the crew open it out of curiosity and get blown all the way back to his island, he throws them off it. Begone, he says, thou vilest of all that live. I may not help a man who is hated by the blessed gods. The gift was the relationship. Waste the gift, and there is nothing left to appeal to. And then there is the one that makes the argument. Odysseus finally reaches home and goes, disguised as a beggar, to a pig farm. The man living there is a slave. Eumaeus, his own swineherd, the poorest character in the story who has no idea who this is, he kills 2 young pigs for him. He gives him the better portion. He puts him by the fire, and at the end of the night he throws his own thick cloak over him and goes out to sleep in the cold with the animals, because somebody has to watch the pigs. And the line he says while doing it is the clearest statement of the law in the whole poem. It would not be right for me to slight a stranger, he says, even if one worse than you turned up, because all strangers and beggars are from Zeus. The slave gets it right. The kings keep getting it wrong. That is not an accident of plot. That is the poem making a point on purpose. Because the suitors are the other end of the same law, and this is the part people miss. Everybody remembers them as men trying to steal a wife. Under Xenia, they are something much more specific. They are guests. They are inside the house, eating the host's food, drinking his wine, slaughtering his animals day after day for years, and giving nothing back. The Cyclops is a host who devours his guest. The suitors are guests who devour their host. Homer has built the crime and its exact mirror image into the same poem, and put 108 men on one side of it and one giant on the other, which is why the ending is not really revenge. It is enforcement. And then there is the bit that stops all of this from being a tidy moral. The Phaeacians are the best hosts in the poem. Textbook, from the first element to the last. They find a naked, shipwrecked stranger on a beach. They wash him, clothe him, feed him, hold games in his honor, decline to press him for his name until he is ready to give it, load him with more gifts than he took home from Troy, and then sail him back to Ithaca themselves, while he sleeps in the bottom of the boat. They do everything right. And on the way home, Poseidon, who is furious that they helped, meets that ship in sight of their own harbor and turns it to stone with a slap of his open hand, rooted to the seabed, in full view of everyone standing on the shore. And the Phaeacians look at that, and they make a decision. They resolve to stop. No more escorts for anyone ever again. 12 bulls for Poseidon, and the door closes. So the poem that spends 24 books insisting on this law also shows you the one people who kept it perfectly being punished for keeping it, and shutting themselves off from strangers forever as a result. Homer does not resolve that. He puts it near the end and leaves it there. One honest note about how much of this was real. Xenia, in the historical period, is genuinely well attested. Herman's work is built on inscriptions as well as poetry, so this is not something that only exists inside a story, but what is documented is chiefly an aristocratic institution. Formal, inherited bonds between elite families in different cities. We do not have good evidence that any traveler could knock on any door and be washed and fed. Take it as a value the Greeks held and argued about, not as a description of what happened to every stranger on every road. Which brings us back to the cave and to a man standing in it on purpose. Odysseus stayed because he believed the law applied, and he did not just wait for his gift, He asked for it formally, out loud, while the thing in front of him was eating his crew 2 at a time. He got an answer. The Cyclops told him that his gift would be this. He would be eaten last, after all his companions. He got his Xenian. The custom was observed. He had walked into a room expecting the world to work a particular way, and it did not, and 6 men died of the difference. Every unwritten rule you keep when nobody's watching, and nobody would ever know, is the same bet he made. Almost every time, you were standing in a house.